All right, it is time for Currently Reading Challenge Weekly Reading Update. What does it say? Update? Wrap up? No, wrong word. And recap. All of those things. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm super excited to be here today and to share with you how my week 4 went for my Currently Reading project. My Currently Reading project, or challenge, rather, my challenge, is that I am focusing on the books that are on my Currently Reading. I've put the titles into jars, fiction and nonfiction, and each week I pick 5 titles, 3 fiction and 2 nonfiction, and those are the titles I work on for the week. My goal is to read 75 pages a day, for 5 days out of the week, for a grand total of 375 pages for the week. And as always, I will go through book by book from least read pages to most read pages. So let's see how I did. Okay, first up, with 30 pages read, I read The Diary of Anaïs Nin, Volume 1, 1931 to 1934. This one I didn't read as much of. I did actually implement a bit of a strategy, which I will get to later in the video, for this week, because it was a challenging week. There were a lot of slow reads in this one, including this one. I am enjoying this one. It's come up before in May, as well as I think in October. And it's a really interesting read. This part I'm not in. There was a sticky part in this one where she's going to a therapist. I don't know what term they use at that time. And there were some things, actually I don't remember if it was in this part or the other part. And I'm like, wow, a therapist should stop before that moment, I think it wouldn't fly now. So there was something like that, but there's also, it's interesting because it is a diary as opposed to a memoir. It's not, she's very open. Memoirs can be very open as well, but this is, so she shows and shares insecurities, which sometimes feels weird about someone who, is so well known and respected. And so, but I think it's just one of those things that we all have those moments. So in some ways that's comforting. In some ways I kind of like, don't say that, don't do that. And not saying people shouldn't have their feels. I'm not saying that, but I kind of surprised at some of the insecurities. So that was a bit sticky. But then as I kept reading, it got to a pretty interesting turn of events and, or turn of thinking. And it is very reflective, and she really is, so good at, understanding people and thinking about people and relationships, which I find so fascinating. So it's a good read, but I didn't read tons of it. So I read 30 pages of this, and I have 247 pages left, which I feel is quite much more doable. The book itself is just over 400 pages, which is long for a memoir. I don't know if I would dive into another 400-page memoir, at least not for a while, because I have been working on this since, very lightly, but this is at this point my oldest from this list, because I started it in 2019. I took a huge hiatus. It was unavailable, so that of course makes it hard to read. So 30 pages read, 247 to go. The next least pages read was Essential Art History. So I read 42 pages from this one, and where did I get to? I think I was at Land Art. Was that it? So I read L, M, N, and O. N was a bit challenging because there was lots of neo. We have neoclassicism, neo-dada, neo-expressionism, neo-impressionism, and neoplasticism, neoplatonicism, neoromanticism, and then there's also, after a few letters, new art history, New English Art Club, new realism, new wave. New wave I knew because not new wave music, but new wave film, because it's like films like Godard and Truffaut. So yeah. Oh, and then also neo-expressionist groups in New York in the 80s, and then the new wave of music was, of course, in the 80s as well. So, so I got to, and then and so now I'm on paint. So I didn't think I was going to read a lot of this. I didn't end up reading a lot of this. And then yesterday I decided to just get a bit more done because I didn't like putting it aside. There was one day I didn't read it at all. There's one day the timing of I totally I totally messed up my reading timing and almost forgot to read. Like all of a sudden I looked at the clock, I was like, oh, so I didn't read it that day. But then I did decide yesterday that I just wanted to read a little bit more, so I stuck with it. Not that I'm not enjoying it, it's just been a challenging week, and as I said, I implemented a bit of a strategy. So, and for this one, another reason why I decided to keep going is with the 42 pages read, now I am down to 96 pages to go. So I'm under 100 pages, which is something that is always something that I look forward to, or something where the gears shift in my brain and I feel like, ooh, I can finish it. So now, I'm sure for this particular work, it'll take me more than one more week to finish it. But once it's under 100, it feels possible. And next, a book that has more than 100, many more than 100 pages left. But I'm surprised this wasn't the first one to come up. And the next, it's only one more page than Essential Art History, but still, it is one more page than Essential Art History, and that is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I forgot to mention the translator last time, translated from the French by Christine Doniger. Translator, illustrators, authors' titles are always in the description box below, but I did forget to mention that this is translated. So this is a classic work, and I got 43 pages read. I have 84 pages left in the volume. I'm in volume 2, so that also feels possible, and overall I have 872 pages left. I was at 915, so 872 feels pretty good. And this was good. I really enjoyed the section that I read about it, that I read in it. My reading pace is a little faster than it used to be, which I think actually might be due to this project, especially from reading The Beach and sort of staying with one work for such a consistent period of time. I did take a little bit of liberties. There was one section where the author directly talks to the audience saying, okay, before we get to this next step, I need to sort of explain something. And I'm always like, I'm not a fan of that, because one, it lets you know where things are going. But in this particular instance, it was something where he was explaining that what was coming is anachronistic. It was about the layout of the geographical layout, and he said that's not what it looks like right now or at that time or whatever. And I'm like, I couldn't care less. Like, I really, like, if it was something said in Toronto and I knew the streets, and I would be like, you can't go from whatever that street to that street. But generally speaking, I feel like so few people know something with that intensity. But then again, if something is really centered or spotlighted in one particular place, I can understand if you want it correct. I don't know. For me, it let me read that part a little bit faster, because once I got the sense of why he was, breaking the second wall, I don't know what it would be in books. I was like, oh, that doesn't really matter to me. Like, it's interesting or whatever, but I'm not gonna, so I got through that bit a little bit faster. So this is one that I do wonder if I need to have it be a bit more prominent in my reading more consistently. I think it's not one that serves well to go away from it for a long period of time. Maybe actually after finishing a volume, taking a break. But the chapters are so short, like, honestly, like, because there's volumes, like there's books, and then within the books there's books, and within those books there's chapters. So I'm trying to get something that doesn't have a huge spoiler. But like, here's a good example. So here's, a chapter starts here, and then it ends on the next page, and then that chapter is only one page. So generally speaking, there's, I just spent the page. No, it's fine. But underweight. Oh, and then of course the next one is like 5 pages long. But even so, 5 pages long, and this takes me 10 minutes. So I wonder if it's worth keeping it on the roster more consistently. I won't finish this year. There's just no way. Even if it's the only thing I read, which I wouldn't do because I don't like reading like that. But anyway, so this one, I enjoyed it. It is harder. There's a lot of hardship in this novel. I don't think that's any surprise given the title. But I do think I will need, I do want to finish it by the end of next year, and I do think I will need a strategy to do so, whether that's reading it like 1 month on, 1 month off, reading it till I finish a volume, taking 3 weeks off, reading it for 1 week out of every month. I don't know what I'm going to do. I will think of something. I've already thought of many possibilities, and I don't know if any of those would add up to the right amount of time to finish it, but I would like to finish it by the end of next year, and so I think it would be good to have a strategy for it. So I will think of what that will be, and then I will implement it. So yeah, 43 pages read, and I finished a book, like a section, and then I decided to not read it once I got to a good spot, because I knew I couldn't finish the next one, which I do tend to do in these weekly TBRs. I do tend to leave off at a good spot, and so far that's worked out well, but it does mean sometimes it feels like I only read things for like 3 or 4 days, and that feels a bit weird, but it's better than being in the middle of something, I think. So we'll see. Okay, next up for the next amount of pages read, I read 109 pages of Greenhalgh Saga. I am really surprised at this one, but the thing, and I have 199 left, so I'm under 200 pages, that was intentional. This title is 508 pages, the version that I'm reading. It's an Icelandic saga. It's also translated. I'll leave the translator down below for the version that I am reading. I think I got it from Project Gutenberg. And so this was translated. The fifth title was also translated, so all of my fiction this week was translated. I didn't pick up on that when I did my TBR. So Greenhalgh Saga is an Icelandic saga, and this one, because the other reads were pretty slow, Diary of Anaïs and Les Mis and Essential Art History, Greenhalgh Saga, it's not like it's a fast read or anything, but the chapters are really short, and I decided that this was going to be the one that I was going to spend more time on because of the short chapters, and because there's a lot of repetition. Like, it's a lot of sort of the same situation happens. There's, conflict, and, fighting, and then some kind of need for resolve, and then that might lead to stronger ties, or that might lead to resentment, and then conflict, and then fighting. Like, it's kind of the same, it kind of feels like the same thing over and over again, and I have a hard time remembering the characters one to the other. So for this one, I've just decided to just stick with it, and, if I remember some of the mini arcs or some of the longer term character relationships, great, and if I don't, that's fine. It's like I can only get so much from it, and I think it's the longest of the sagas, and I think reading the shorter ones and spending more time and attention with them would be a better way for me to go for the next one that I jump into, and I would like to read them all eventually. So this one, and there are moments that I really enjoy, and then there was a moment that turned, and I was like, oh, I'm not so much of a fan of this kind of theme. So anyway, but I stuck with it, and I read 109 pages. I still can't believe that, 109 pages of one of the Icelandic sagas in 1 week. I'm like so excited. But the biggest number of pages, the largest number of pages was from The Girl Who Played with Fire by Stig Larsson. This is translated from the Swedish. The translator will be down below. And I read 334 pages, and I have 0 left to go. I am so excited. I stuck with it. I knew that I wanted to finish this. I knew that it was an extraordinary number of pages to read in a week, and I just gunned it. So a lot of the days I read like 5 pages from like everything, and then like 100 pages from The Girl Who Played with Fire, because I just wanted to be done. Now this one has a bit of a weird situation. It's the second time I started reading it, and the second time I stopped reading it, and I started reading it for the rereadathon last year, and it was giving a book a second chance. So here we are a year and a half later, trying to finish the title, and I've seen the film, so I know the story, and I decided generally I did a lot of speed reading and a lot of skimming for this one. What I decided to do was the characters and the story arcs that I was interested in, those I read, and then the characters and story arcs I wasn't interested in, I skimmed, or sometimes I would just completely skip. This book is challenging in a lot of ways. There is so much misogyny in it. it and homophobia, and just cutting down verbally or in brains of characters in it, that I found it. And then that's just character to character, like how people think about other people. That doesn't even have to do with the plot, or and the themes and the plot of this one. A lot of it, or one of the key one of the plot threads, there's a sort of crime mystery about it, and that has to do with sex trafficking, which is a really serious subject. And so this just had a lot in it that I don't normally read. I am not, and I'm also very much like, if this is a book that's saying all of these things are wrong, I'm already in agreement with that. So I don't need to learn that by seeing it, especially sometimes so viscerally and with so much vitriol and with so much pain. And so it was a tough read. I'm glad it's done. It's one of the oldest books on my Goodreads TBR. I didn't remember that when I picked it last week. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to stick with it. Also because I DNF'd it twice. I didn't DNF it. I got on hiatus twice. Once last year after starting it for the rereadathon. And then the initial time is, I think I've told the story before in a tag video somewhere, but the initial time, the place that I was living in, I had borrowed a physical copy from the library and I was reading it, and then all of a sudden I heard and felt this huge bang, and a car had driven into the side of the house I was living in. Like, it came up off the road, off the sidewalk, and it hit the house. It didn't go into the house, but it hit the house. So, everything stopped. We had to vacate so the fire department could decide whether or not the structure was sound and all of this stuff. So it was just, so I had to return the book to the library, and I never came back to it. So, well, I did. I came back to it years and years later. So this I actually read, I think, before I was on Goodreads, because I added it that first year, I think. So anyway, I feel like with this one, I feel done. I feel complete. And I'm also going to take the third book, The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, off of my want to read list on Goodreads, because I feel fine reading it here. I'm not going to put myself reading it through another 600 pages. I will say that I do like some of the characters, and that is what made me stick with it. But if I did want to revisit it, I would probably do it within the films, which I think I still have somewhere. But the first one is so disturbing. It's like one of those things. I think there's certain themes, and for me, this is sort of one that talks about vengeance and justice, and and those can be really tough, right? Because to get to the point of vengeance or needing justice or wanting justice, you have to go through the hurt of whatever the events precipitated that. And those are just themes that I'm just not a fan of in terms of reading fiction. And so I know, but this is something that I added to my Goodreads TBR, and I started reading 10 years ago, and I was like, it's a film, and I read it, and I read the first book, and I thought the first book was brilliant. And I'm not saying this book isn't, I'm just simply saying I didn't enjoy it. So yeah, so I really pushed on that one though, and I haven't done speed reading or skimming for a long time, and I am still counting the pages, because those are pages that are coming off of my currently reading, and I picked and choose. I actually ended up reading more than I expected, but my reading pace was quite high. It was more like 80 pages an hour, and it normally would be 60, but it wasn't like 140 or something. Like, I wasn't reading double time, so which isn't quite, math isn't quite right, but anyway, so I ended up stopping and reading more than I expected, and I dedicated a fair amount of time for 4 days in a row to finishing it. I was determined. So I didn't make as much progress on the rest of my reads, but I did finish that one, and that felt good. I did also finish, and all of the pages altogether ended up being 558 pages, and I really went heavy. So 123, 136, 101. Most days it was over 100. 109, the asterisk means I finished something. That was A Girl Who Played with Fire. So those 4 days, in 4 days I got to 488, which is over 375. So yeah, and then I kept going 40 and 58 with like Les Mis and Essential Art History. So I ended up reading, it's actually 558. There's always an adjustment. Every week I have to adjust a couple pages for some reason, but 558 pages for the week out of those 4 titles, which is the most I have read out of any of the weeks that I've been doing this, at least in this round of October. So I feel really good about that, and I thought that I made good progress. And I knew right off the bat that I was going to focus on The Girl Who Played with Fire and sort of leave the rest to sort of like 5 to 10 pages a day. I don't want to do that too often, but it was successful and I am happy about that. I also finished, as a bonus, I did end up finishing Blood Magic by Nora Roberts. I read this as a sort of like treat to myself, as if I got to my page count or I got to whatever goal, this I would read later in the day. And I did end up finishing it in the very, very early hours yesterday. And I ended up really enjoying it. It's the 3rd in the Cousins O'Dwyer series by Nora Roberts. It's a paranormal romance series. I thought it was great. And and that one I started last year in the middle of the year. I am not even sure. It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I finished a series that wasn't like a graphic novel, comics, or manga series. So to actually finish a series that's novels, I'm just super excited about that. And technically, The Girl Who Played with Fire, I'm DNFing it, so I'm considering it complete. So, and that's a series as well. So yeah, so overall, and this ended up being either 120 pages or 160 pages. Is one of those ones where Overdrive is a bit strange in terms of, like, the Overdrive, my Kindle copy doesn't have pages, and Overdrive, the page count changes if you change the size of the letterings or the font. So it's a bit of an estimation, but it is complete. It's also the last romance on my currently reading, so I don't have any romances on my currently reading. So I finished all of them, all 3 of them. In total, I have finished 1 a week for my regular reads, and then now with this week with the Blood Magic, that's 5. So I'm pretty happy about that. I know I keep saying it's not about the finishes, but finishes feel good too. So anyway, I think this week went pretty well. It was tough reading. Like, Les Mis is tough. The Girl Who Played with Fire is tough. And even Yal's is tough. There's a lot of, it's a lot of fighting and stuff like that. And then Essential Art History and Diary of Anaïs Nin were dry and or reflective. And so this was the big action-packed, because it was a big culmination of sort of, because it's a paranormal romance, but there is a story throughout the 3 books as well that has a sort of like family history magic-y piece, and it was so good. I'm really glad I read it. So yeah, so I'm really curious to see what ends up being my reads next week. You will already know because these go up afterwards, and that's what I get to film next, and I look forward to it, and hopefully it was better than last week. I think I made good progress on everything that I was reading, and I'm thrilled about finishing The Girl Who Played with Fire. It's a huge win. But it was heavy. It was heavy. It was a heavy week. So here's to a lighter one. I don't know how many lighter reads I have. We'll see what happens. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video. Take care.